Ready or not, summer is coming, and Wayfair's Memorial Day clearance is on now. Right now through May 25th, get up to 70% off everything home at Wayfair. Plus, score amazing doorbuster deals all sale long and surprise flash deals on Memorial Day. We're talking thousands of products at every style and budget. Now is the time to save big on must-haves for your patio, backyard, and beyond. These savings won't last, so don't wait. Shop Wayfair's Memorial Day clearance now through May 25th.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
My wife now said she saw a couple things. One was a smile on my face that she hadn't seen in about 6 months. And the other thing was that all the fudge I was making was piling up. She started sneaking some of it out the front door. And that was the first step, was finding out what I can, figure it out. All it was a little pea purpose. I was just cooking for Thanksgiving. And all of a sudden, I became an entrepreneur and now I have a fudge shop.
Welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom, where we share pearls of wisdom shared by some of the world's top entrepreneurs, leaders, and difference makers. Here's your host, Govindh Jayaraman.
Hi, I'm Govindh Jayaraman, and this is Paper Napkin Wisdom, episode 365. So happy you're here. Every once in a while, you meet someone whose story makes you pause even before you understand why. Not because the story is hard, though this one is. Not because the accomplishments are impressive, though, again, they absolutely are. But because somewhere inside the story, there's a question of waiting for all of us. What happens when the life you were building changes in a way you never planned? What happens when the identity you relied on no longer fits the conditions in front of you? In fact, it's impossible. What happens when the next version of your life does not arrive as clarity, but as one small step you're willing to take anyway? Today, I'm sitting down with Aaron Hale, and Aaron is a former Army Explosive Ordnance Disposal technician. Entrepreneur, speaker, podcast host, real estate investor, endurance athlete, and the host of the Point of Impact podcast. While serving in Afghanistan, Aaron lost his eyesight after an IED explosion. 4 years later, after a complication from that injury, bacterial meningitis took his hearing as well. And yet, this conversation is not about loss. It's about what gets built after loss. Aaron's napkin says, resilience is built, not given. And underneath that, he writes an equation. Pressure plus purpose plus progress equals growth. And that's where our conversation begins. Because so many leaders spend their lives trying to avoid pressure. They build businesses, teams, systems, and identities that are supposed to protect them from the hard thing. But Aaron's story invites a different possibility. Maybe pressure isn't the thing that breaks us. Maybe pressure is the place where we can begin to form when it is joined with purpose and followed by progress. And maybe progress doesn't have to look heroic at first. Sometimes it looks like holding onto the counter with one hand and stirring a pot with the other. Sometimes it looks like saying, "How can I?" instead of repeating, "I can't." Sometimes it looks like taking the next few steps without needing to see the whole mountain. So, as you listen today, don't rush to the summit. Listen for the counter. Listen for the small purpose. Listen for the place in your own life where you may be resisting what is already true, because Aaron Hale's wisdom is not just about surviving pressure. It's about becoming someone new through it. Let's dive into my conversation with Aaron. Aaron Hale, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'm really excited to be with you here today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be part of the show and happy to be invited here.
So we came by an introduction from a mutual friend, Kevin Thompson, and he introduced me to you. But then I started to look into you a little bit further, and you've got a really fascinating story. So I'm really excited to dive in. And then your napkin is really tremendous. So I'm going to describe the napkin to everybody listening, because people obviously sometimes are not looking at it. At the top, it says resilience is built, not given. And then underneath that, you have a bit of an equation: pressure plus purpose plus progress equals growth. And underneath that, you've got some other images that we're going to get to in time. But why did you share that message with me?
Well, for one, Kevin is an incredible guy, and is one of those genuinely kind people. So I'm appreciative of him introducing me to you as well as others. It's just so great. But the resilience equation, it's just something that I've experienced throughout many hardships in my own life, and I don't compare mine to any others. It's just looking back and realizing that I'd never expected to go down this road, and each time I've come out of it stronger. And I tried to look back and figure out how did I end up this way? How did I end up with this perspective? And try to explain it to others, because obviously, having been a former Army EOD technician, military bomb squad, that hurt locker guy. I was injured. I lost my eyesight in 2011. Had to go through a complete transformation from soldier to blind veteran, disabled, from capable provider and protector of my family to stay-at-home dad, and learning how to do all of it all over again as a blind person. But then 4 years later, having to go through a similar process when there was a complication after the explosion, and 4 years later, I contracted bacterial meningitis through a portion of a crack in my skull that hadn't been patched up yet. So there was a slow leak, and a path out is a path in. I contracted bacterial meningitis. I lost my hearing 4 years after losing my eyesight, and had to start from scratch, blank slate, so to speak. But it wasn't really, because I'd been learning how to be more resilient all the while, and it wasn't as difficult as I thought it was. It was incredibly difficult, very challenging, but I had a whole new perspective. And as I learned this, and as I tried to dissect how it was that I came out with such a great, philosophy, great outlook on all of it, I tried to frame it in a way that I could teach others. There was a saying that I'd read probably in a meme somewhere, but it said, the story of your struggle may someday be the blueprint for someone else's survival. And it gave my story purpose. So if I could frame my story so that it could help others, then it gave me purpose. So I took the pressure, I took the purpose, and I started making the progress. And it led to my own growth.
One of the things that you said, Aaron, right off the top, which I think was really amazing, and it was very subtle, but I think it was really intentional. You said, how did I end up this way? And a lot of times when people have gone through pressure, like something really hard, something like losing your sight, losing your hearing, even one of those things, people use that sentence in a defeatist way. How did I end up this way? And it's like this defeatist statement, but there was something subtle about the way you said it that was confident and momentum building. And I feel like that's on purpose. Was it?
You know what? You mentioned it right there. It's momentum. But then there's another. I look at resilience as not just a mental state, not just a belief, not just a mindset, but there's an equation like on my napkin, and there's neuroscience to it. There's physics. I call it my first law of kicking ass is actually just Newton's first law of inertia, just with my name on the front. But a body in motion tends to stay in motion, and a body at rest tends to stay at rest. And when it comes to resilience, we can either resist the change. Inertia is the force that resists change. So we can use it to our advantage when it comes to our own momentum, or we can use it to become victims of our situation. So how did I end up with my own momentum? Is that I used the power of inertia. I made little changes. I also, whatever situation we're finding ourselves in, some of them are of our own making. Some of them are life's little booby traps. But how we resist the change or we accept the situation and move forward to it, it's an act of humility and acceptance and a willingness to learn and grow and change. So every time I find myself in a situation where I'm faced with this change in my momentum, do I use inertia to resist it? Do I recognize the forces that I'm putting against or toward the momentum change? Am I using it to grow? Maybe build on my momentum, or am I recognizing that I'm resisting in some way? It becomes a way to step outside the situation, your emotions, and look at it in a logical manner. I try to do that every time the sirens start going off, the unhappy emotions. You gotta accept them for what they are. Yeah, when I got blown up and I lost my eyesight, I wasn't a very happy place. And the change really started happening internally when I accepted the situation. I started looking at it logically. Said, instead of saying repeating to myself, I can't be a dad, I can't be a soldier, I can't be an EOD technician anymore. And started saying, how can I be the best blind me I can be? That's when the real growth happened. Same transformation happened when I lost my hearing. So I was blind and deaf. And it was 6 months from hospitalization to getting my first cochlear implant turned on my right side, which you can tell that I'm not wearing because it didn't work. There was too much scar tissue over there in the inner ear, so it just didn't take. So I had to again accept that I fell victim for a little while to what was it, what's that paradox of hope, Stockdale paradox. I put all of my hope in that one cochlear implant and waiting for it to get turned on so I could hear again, and it didn't work, and I was crushed. But then I had another opportunity with my left ear, but this time I wasn't placing all of my hope in that one mechanism. I'd already started to learn how to be blind and deaf and be the best blind deaf me I could be. Thankfully, the second one took. I have a connection to the outside world so I can have a conversation with you. But the transformation, the resistance was no longer there. It was acceptance. And then I used the power of inertia and momentum to move myself further and grow and, you know, fit this new, paradigm of my life. All the while, I was finding new ways to be a dad, growing my family, starting up businesses, investing in real estate, running marathons, ultramarathons, climbing mountains, whitewater kayaking. I was figuring many things that I never considered before losing my hearing or my eyesight, but it was the acceptance of change instead of resistance to it. In many ways, choosing my hard and accepting the hardship that um, that was given to me, and all of it, being open, being humble enough to accept it and move forward, and grow from it.
That's really profound and hard fought, I think. And this is where your formula, I think, comes, right? The pressure plus purpose plus progress equals growth. And all three ingredients are important. One of the things that I think is really, so I have a bit of a personal experience with bacterial meningitis. Longtime listeners of the show will know that my son had bacterial meningitis when he was 9, and also, like you, Aaron, received a cochlear implant because he was only single-sided deaf. But we chose at the time to get him a cochlear implant should anything happen to his good ear, so that we wanted to make sure that he had an insurance policy against that. And so he has that cochlear device. But it didn't really hit us how incredible that recovery journey was until how long it took afterward. Like, people think that after the injury, there's a little bit of recovery and then you start moving on, but that's not really how it works. It takes a long time. And to me, one of the things that I feel really striking about your story is that for us, I think the recovery journey, emotionally and otherwise, took us 5 to 6 years after his bacterial meningitis. And if you're doing the math on that, that's roughly until recently for us, because, just given his age. But what I wonder about for you was, you're in the middle of that recovery journey from losing eyesight, and then bacterial meningitis kicks in, which, by the way, people don't understand it's a bacterial infection of the meninges, which is the thin layer that protects your brain and spinal cord from infection. And it's a clear sort of void. There are no white blood cells in the meninges. And so if any infection, if any bacteria happens to pierce that membrane and get into that protective layer, which is sort of like this force field, it spreads throughout the entire body like wildfire. So bacteria fires off like wildfire throughout the body. But most importantly, your body deals with infection by inflammation. So it inflames, and the meninges presses up against the brain, against the spinal cord, and against your all of the resulting, your other very sensitive nerves around your ears, and that crushes the ciliae, which are your hair in your inner ear canal, which then creates a loss of hearing. And it's a profound loss of hearing, which means completely deaf. Like, an airplane could be taking off beside you and you wouldn't know that it's happening, except for maybe the ground vibration. So I'm very familiar with what you're talking about. And first of all, it's miraculous that you were able to survive that bacterial meningitis, because many times people don't, and that's also tragic. And so you're in the middle of one recovery journey, only to have another one, and yet, despite all that pressure, you found purpose in that. How did that purpose? I think sometimes people wait for purpose to happen for them. And I'm curious about how you rediscovered that inertia in the direction of your own purpose. What did that look like for you?
When it comes to purpose, I really like how a friend and actually guest of mine on my show, Doug G, Jordan Grumet, put it. He talks about the purpose code, as in people want to find or be given this big P, capital P purpose, when sometimes all you need is a little p. It's something to do sometimes. And that gets you through, on a day to day, but you can build upon that. And for me, that first transition period, it was frankly a little bit out of boredom, maybe a little bit out of terror of being stuck in the situation. And all I want to do was uh, figure something out. And previous life, I was a Navy chef. Also, I cooked for a 3-star admiral stationed in Italy. It's not a hardship duty, but it was pretty incredible. I got to cook some great food, and when I found myself with those hair cells had been damaged beyond repair, and I was totally deaf. And you're right, I was so profoundly deaf that I could not hear, that jawbone conduction. I would chomp so hard down on a tortilla chip, and there was nothing. That's complete deafness. And also right there in that inner ear and the cochlea, where those hearing hair cells are the vestibular balance hair cells. I lost my balance also. And with 100% blindness, I've got this sleep disorder called non-24, where I can't reset my circadian rhythm. So there's all these things compounding and trying to drag me into this, this downward spiral of depression, anger, all of that. And I had to figure out, like I said, instead of saying, I can't, how can I? Well, once I figured out something I can do, what can I do when I'm blind and deaf? And just kind of waiting for that cochlear implant, not just to get turned on. Like I said, it's a process. It's kind of like trying to hit a bullet with a bullet while your brain tries to figure out this new digital input, while every so often you have to go back to the audiologist and get it tuned in and add more, kind of like a color palette. You get the primary colors first, then you eventually you're allowed to get the secondary colors and more of the spectrum. It's just you get more input. So it's a long process, and in the interim time, I had to figure out something to do, because sitting around feeling sorry for myself got boring after a while. When you cry all the tears and you go boo-hoo for a while, and you're like, okay, now what? Really, that's what happened. All the excuses and all the reasons and all of the sad stuff, and you sort through all of that, and you're sitting there going, what do we do next? So I got up, and I figured out that if I could just hold on to the counter with one hand, I could stir a pot with the other. And it was like being right back on the ship again. But I started cooking. I made this huge Thanksgiving spread. My girlfriend at the time, my wife now, said she saw a couple things. One was a smile on my face that she hadn't seen in about 6 months. And the other thing was that all the fudge I was making was piling up. So she did. I said she started sneaking some of it out the front door. But how stealthy do you have to be around a blind deaf guy? And that was the first step, was finding out what I can. How can I do something? Figure it out. And all it was a little P purpose. I was just cooking for Thanksgiving. And all of a sudden, I became an entrepreneur, and I had a fudge shop, and I started figuring out how to run again, holding on to the stability bar with a G.I. Joe Kung Fu grip. And I used the trekking poles that I once took into the mountains just to walk with this weird crab walk out to my mailbox and back. But every little step was a win. It was my way of starting to build up my momentum up again. And eventually, a year later, after the meningitis, I was running another marathon. And then I started running ultramarathons. In 2023, I became the first deaf-blind person to finish the Badwater 135. And just a few months ago, I became the first deaf-blind person to run from the coast of Africa to Mount Kilimanjaro, and then I summited Kilimanjaro, the tallest mountain in Africa.
That's incredible. So when you think about, so for people who don't know what Badwater 135 is, and I'm familiar with it because I have some friends of mine who are absolutely completely crazy like you and do these ultramarathon insanities. Can you please describe the sheer torture that is Badwater 135?
It's touted as the world's toughest foot race. It's 135 miles from the lowest point in North America, Badwater Basin, 82 feet below sea level, over 2 mountain ranges through Death Valley to the Mount Whitney portal, trailhead to the mountain. Just 11 miles from the top of Mount Whitney.
It is a challenging journey for absolutely anyone to undertake, and what an accomplishment. And your accomplishment, I mean, not to understate the accomplishment of running from the coast to the peak of Kilimanjaro, which is also a tremendous task, and I know requires an absolute ton of training. The thing that I'm struck by, and people are going to look at this and say, "Oh my God, he's an ultramarathoner. That's incredible." But that's not. That's the product of the growth. But the brilliance in what you're sharing is the little P, right? The little P was a Thanksgiving dinner. If it wasn't for the Thanksgiving dinner, the Thanksgiving dinner didn't lead to the fudge, and the fudge didn't lead to the running, and the running didn't lead to, one thing after another. It was the little P that started things off for you, wasn't it?
Absolutely. That's how it should all start. First, it's the acceptance, not resisting it, not ignoring the situation or trying to deny reality. I was blind and deaf. So I had to think of something that I could do. And if I needed to figure out a new way to do it, then so be it. And eventually I found new tools, new methods, new techniques. And I sought out mentors that were already doing what I wanted to do, coaches, and I consumed. I educated myself, and we would talk about, putting that work in, being productive, and stepping into the role that we're meant to do, and turning that small P into the big P means growing, means becoming. So I what I did, and I learned this, is that one of the best ways to learn something is to place yourself in the position of the teacher. So you imagine yourself as trying to relay these lessons you're learning to the next person. And it's like the hero's journey that comes full circle. Once you go through your crucible and you slay the dragon and you find your mentor, then you come back to the village and you become the mentor. So the whole time I'm literally thinking, how would I tell this? How would I tell this story? And it helped me figure out, what questions do I need to ask to make this work? And I took my small P, started turning them into big Ps, and I turned that I can't into how can I into how can I so I can teach it.
Yeah, that's really amazing. Explain to me a little bit about You have this demeanor, and there's a very transparent quality to you, Aaron. And I still think, when we think about the Hurt Locker, the the soldiers who do the kind of work that you used to do are, I think, the craziest human beings on the planet. Like, you're going up to a bomb. Everybody else is get away from that bomb, and you guys are going toward the bomb to make it safe for everybody else. I mean, this is really heroic stuff in my eyes, and from my perspective. But there's a calm in the face of all of that. I need to find an inner center that's a part of that. I wonder if that served you as you experience blindness and then you experience deafness. There's this explosive thing that's happening, and you maintained your center despite that chaos. Is a part of that aligned or not?
I'm certainly not risk averse. Yeah, I went from a cozy cooking job in the Navy to trading my uniform to going into the desert and defusing bombs. Yeah, there's a little craziness, a little gene. I remember my mom made the mistake of asking me way back when I was a teenager if all my friends were jumping off the bridge, would you do it too? I said, "Mom, I'd be the first one jumping." Uh, but it comes down to not being afraid of the unknown. And the one thing about being an EOD technician is that we realize that there are no safe conditions on the battlefield when performing our jobs. But the number one thing you learn, the very first thing you learn as a student in the EOD school, are all of the safeties. Every way a piece of ordnance can kill you, and how to set that off so that you can avoid that when you recognize the situation. So we come into an unknown situation. We have this whole list of risks, and what we do is start checking off the list that don't, the hazards that don't apply to our current situation. And I use a systematic approach to risk analysis. And will this kill me? Will running Badwater kill me? Most likely not. Will it hurt? Probably. Will I have a great story afterwards? Most likely.
Yeah, that's amazing. So there is like almost a clinical calm to the way you approach this, isn't there?
I'm sorry, what was that?
There's almost a clinical calm to the way you approach this. You have a checklist. You're mitigating against risk. You have a process that you're leading into that keeps you centered and calm, even though the circumstance may be stressful.
Well, a way to relate that to everyday life is just to say, what's the worst that could happen? And it takes away that fear of the unknown when you really try to look into it, really try to examine. If you're talking about a career change, or you're talking about ending or starting a relationship, or whatever the thing is that that next step that you're afraid of taking, and that comes down to that resistance to building your resilience, is to examine, why are you resisting? And one of the things is it may be fear. It may be fear of trying, fear of the unknown, of stepping out there. But all it takes is to shine a little light and say, okay, what is the worst thing? And can I handle the worst thing that could possibly happen? And usually, almost always actually, the worst possible thing we can imagine isn't even a potential option. We make up a lot of stuff in our minds that just won't happen or can't happen. For some reason, we build it up in our heads.
So when you when you, I think that's so true. We overestimate how bad the bad stuff is, and we overestimate also how happy we're going to be from the good stuff too. Like we kind of mix both of those things up, and by overestimating how awful and how terrible each of those things are going to be. And I think your approach is a great one. The other question is, you talked a lot about wanting to wanting to find your way, wanting to find your purpose, which helped you create direction, and that was about your story, your struggle may become the blueprint for someone else. And it felt like that was a bit of a motivating factor along your purpose as you started to find that bigger P. Is that right? Like contribution was a big part of that. What are you going to give? How can you help other people with your own story? That became something that you wanted to be involved in too, right?
Well, if you think about it, you've analyzed the situation. You've removed those self-imposed barriers to starting. You've got a great purpose in building your resistance, or moving towards the pressure, or moving with it. And after that, all it takes is the next step. What is my most important next move here? How do I do it? So it all comes down to why aren't you doing it? Why not? Right? So just that one of the things I like to think of as doing something that I do not want to do, even if it's small, something every single day that I'm training my brain to be more resilient. Yeah, one thing that I just don't feel like doing, and that's getting up and going out for a walk and talking to a neighbor when I just don't feel like getting off the couch, or uh, whatever that might be. To having a difficult conversation that you've been pushing off, to starting that next entrepreneurial journey. What is it? What is it that you're resisting? And remove that barrier and take the first step.
You've been doing this for a little while now, Aaron, and I think you've gotten good at building momentum. And at the bottom of your napkin, you've got this depiction of you climbing up Kilimanjaro, stick figure you, but still you, climbing up Kilimanjaro, and it says, keep moving even when it is hard. And I think that's a great example of all of the things that you've been talking about. Is this something that you have to do intentionally every day, or is it something that's on autopilot now, or is it still hard?
Well, that's the thing, is that there's a thing about inertia, right? It can be your barrier. It can be a force against you, or you can use it to your advantage. Now, when you start doing these daily acts of choosing your hardship, stepping into the very thing that you once feared, you start to build that momentum, and the inertia, that resistance, the resistance to change is working with you. It's resistance to stopping, resistance to slowing down, and it takes a lot less effort to make the next change in that velocity, the change in momentum. So, I mean, for example, the running, it was really difficult just to stay on my feet. And I would get on the treadmill and press the quick start, half a mile an hour, very, very painfully slow. But I started there. And then I got to maybe a couple beeps with a speed up arrow, and I was walking and started to jog. I didn't just lace up and step out the front door. Inadvisable for a blind person, but I didn't start with a marathon. I started with a walk, and I started building up that momentum. And I just kept going. So then Now it's harder for me to not run than it is to consider running 100-miler. I gotta run every single day because I like it, and it would feel bad. I am resistant to going more than 2 days without running because that's one of the things I enjoy doing.
That's amazing. What what is the thing that if you could go and talk to Aaron just after, you know, a- after that IED device took your eyes, what would you say to yourself? Having gone through everything that you've gone through, having experienced what you've done, having summited Kilimanjaro, all of those experiences, what gift would you give to Aaron right after that IED blew up?
What would I come back to say or to teach about those experiences?
Yeah, what would you tell Aaron that would have been helpful for Aaron to hear right in that moment?
I mean,
Because somewhere right now, somebody is dealing with their own explosion in their lives, and they need a piece of wisdom. What would you tell them?
I didn't focus on the summit when I was at the coastline of Africa. I focused on getting out of Mombasa that very first day. And that was an incredibly hard challenge. Somebody needs to have a very serious conversation with the Department of Transportation, road maintenance. But it was hot, it was traffic, the pedestrians, the road was shambles. And I'm a blind deaf guy being led by a sighted guide with really bad balance. I wasn't thinking at all about the mountain until we got about midday, and I was thinking, man, if it's gonna be like this the whole way, there's no way I'm making up that mountain. I might not make it to the mountain. But really, it comes down to I focus on the next few steps, the next step, and the next. Don't worry about the big picture. Just make sure your compass is pointed in the right direction and just focus on the next couple steps. You don't have to eat those, you know, the whole elephant, so to speak. Just take a couple bites at a time. Um, and that's really it. It's incredible what we can accomplish when we just have that purpose and direction, and we have the right motivation.
Yeah, I think it's so powerful, and that image of you making it to the counter and mixing the fudge is pretty incredible. Just getting started, just getting something started is incredible to me. Aaron, you're an inspiration. I could spend a lot of time with you, but our time is sadly coming to an end for this session. A while ago, 11 years ago, someone came to the show. He's a great friend of the show. His name is John Ruland. He gave us a napkin. What you appreciate appreciates. It was a message of gratitude, right? When you give gratitude to someone, they appreciate and value not only for you and for them and the relationship you have, but everywhere. And that started. It was at the front end of a journey of gratitude and gifting that he spread around the world. And he suddenly passed away 15 months ago. And ever since, we've been paying forward his message of gratitude by asking every guest to shout out someone who was important to them on their journey and pay forward some gratitude. So who would you like to shout out today?
I'm sorry. What would I like to do today?
Who would you like to shout out today? Who would you like to give some gratitude to today?
Well, I did that at the top of the mountain. There was two other blind men. There were two other blind men. And two of my adventurer friends, both veterans, both blind, that came on this journey with me. And they didn't do the run. They just did the climb with me. And there was many smiles, backslapping, and tears through the laughter of having accomplished this together. And that's Lonnie Bedwell and Steve Baskus.
That's fantastic. Well, I've got a fun picture in my head of that moment for you, and I'm really glad that Kevin put us together. Thank you for being here, Aaron. It was a pleasure.
Gratitude's mutual. Thank you very much for having me.
What an awesome conversation with Aaron Hale. I wonder what stayed with you. Maybe it was the equation on the napkin. Pressure plus purpose plus progress equals growth. Maybe it was the line at the top, resilience is built, not given. Or maybe it was something much smaller. Aaron standing at the counter, blind, deaf, holding on with one hand and stirring with the other, not trying to solve the rest of his life in that moment, just making Thanksgiving dinner. And maybe that's where resilience becomes real. Not in the speech, not at the summit, not at the finish line of Badwater 135, but in the first small act that proves that motion is still possible. Aaron reminded us that purpose does not always arrive as calling. It just arrives as something to do, something useful, something right in front of us. And when we choose that little purpose, we begin to make and create progress. When we create progress, we begin to build momentum. When we build momentum, growth becomes more than just an idea. It becomes who we are becoming. So maybe the question for you is not, how do I climb the whole mountain? Maybe the question is, what's the next step that I can take? What is the reality I can stop resisting? What is the small purpose that I can put me back into motion? Because resilience is not something we wait to receive. It's something we build. One accepted reality, one small act, one small step. And sincere thanks to Aaron Hale for sharing your wisdom, your courage, your lived example of what it means to keep moving even when it is hard. And thank you for joining us here at Paper Napkin Wisdom. So take a moment today, grab a napkin and write down the next step you already know is yours to take. Then take it. And if this conversation spoke with you, share it with someone who may be standing at their own counter right now, holding on with one hand and wondering how to begin again. And until next time, remember, the greatest wisdom is often simple enough to fit on a napkin and powerful enough to change your life. I believe in you. Make it a great day.